What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the Funnel Vision Show. It's Mikel Dia here, founder and CEO of Funnelytics. And today we've got another episode where we're going to dive into the nuances of how you can really take your agency to another level by thinking about positioning. Because there are so many agencies out there. There are so many service providers to the point where really digital marketing has become commoditized. And anyone and everyone can go on a freelancer site like Upwork and basically tell people that they do digital marketing. So we've got a positioning expert on our show today, Jeff Meade. How are you doing, Jeff? Thank you for being here.
I'm great. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's going to be a lot of fun. I'm very excited to talk about this topic. As we always start with this show, I want to know your not so humble bragging rights. I want to know what you've been able to do for your clients. I want to know what you've been able to do for your own business. In other words, why should people listen?
Right. Great question. I like it. I like it a lot. Let's see. When I think about what I've done for clients, essentially when clients come to me, they want to grow their business. And I think a testament to that is one of my clients, I've recently put them on the Adweek fastest growing 100. And so for anybody that doesn't know, that's a global list of the 100 fastest growing agencies in the world. And they've been on that list for the past 3 years. And that's exciting because, when they came to me, they said, hey, we really want to grow. And so there was just some things we had to unlock and really just get them to become the best versions of themselves. But, for me, as exciting as that is, I get to see the stuff behind. And what's really great is not only is their revenue growing, which and many of your listeners know, that's a vanity metric. Their profit has been growing too. And so that's really exciting. When I think about what I've been able to do for my own business, I've been an agency founder 2 times in the past. And right now I run a management consultancy for agencies. But when I was running my own agency, I grew it past 20 million, which felt great, which felt really good. And it's funny at the time, as we were growing it, when you get to these milestones, you don't even realize how big a deal it is, because when you get there, you start saying, well, how do we become 50 million and 100 million? And so you start thinking you're a small agency. But then you gain perspective and realize most agencies don't cross $1 million, right? And so what's really cool is just using all that knowledge to help my clients. And lastly, I think why should people listen to me? It's like I said, I've worn many hats. I've been an agency founder twice. I've been a member of different executive teams. I've been on the client side. And so I have all this experience, and I use that experience to help my clients. But I also enjoy being a thought leader. And so you can see my writing on my website, Medium, Substack, but it's also been featured in like Harvard Business Review, Fast Company, Entrepreneur, Ad Age, pretty much any place that agency owners are reading about how to manage their business. You could probably find my writing there.
Oh man, that's really cool. And congrats on scaling to 20 million. You're 100% right. Most agencies barely get past the 1 million mark. So I think a big part of that is what we're going to talk about today, which is positioning and how did you kind of get to that? So let's take a step back before we dive into kind of the whole concept of positioning. Let's talk about that agency journey. How did you get to 20 million? And what was the tipping point where you decided, I assume you exited the agency and you sold, but, and correct me if I'm wrong, but what was the tipping point where you said, you know what, I'm going to now start helping agencies? So walk me through kind of that timeline, that journey.
Yeah. So what we did really good, that first agency, our positioning was on point. I mean, we made a lot of mistakes, but positioning was on point. And so for us, it was, and funny enough, when we started, we said, we want to be consultants, right? We were young and we said, we want to consult on at that time, Gen Y market. So really big vision, and no one was biting. And I remember going back to a college professor and saying, this doesn't make sense. And he pretty much said, guys, you're in your early 20s. No one believes you're a consultant. They're just not going to take you seriously, especially back then. Now I think you can pull it off a little easier. But then it wasn't going to work. And so he kind of just shifted our perspective a little bit and said, come to it from a knowledge perspective, from an insights perspective. And that's kind of what we did. And so we've changed the focus of the agency and we started doing research. And so we became known as the researchers in this space. And so anybody who wanted information on that teen market, they were then coming to us. So we were really tightly positioned. Everybody was marketing to them, but no one really understood what made them tick. And so that really helped us a lot. And funny enough, too, in that whole thing was, in many ways, we just developed a better mousetrap. I don't know if you've ever been in a focus group, but usually when focus groups were happening, they would bring you to this downtown, in any city, downtown office, and they would talk to you. It'd be like 6 or 8 people in a room, and you're talking about a random topic. We flipped that on its head. All of a sudden, we were in the neighborhoods. I can remember I had some folks from Levi's at the time, not to name drop, but had some folks from Levi's, and we had them up in some projects in New York, right? So we really just flipped it on its head, and people really got to see the different pockets of youth culture. In many ways, it was like field trips. We would take people out of their comfort zone, and they got to talk to people and really understand what the consumer was thinking. And no one was really doing that, right? Research was really sanitized. It was either a survey or it was, let's take you to a facility where the client sits behind glass and then they just watch the consumers. But we were saying, oh, we're going to take you to them. So we were in people's bedrooms, their houses. Like I said, we're at the YMCAs, we're on the basketball courts. We were everywhere. We had this network that helped us get everywhere. And so in a nutshell, our positioning was so tight, no one had what we had, right? And so it allowed us to not only speak to the companies like the Levi's of the world, but also the agencies. The agencies then needed to validate some of the marketing and the creative that they were putting together. And so they were calling on us. So we just had a better mousetrap.
So a better mousetrap is one thing, but then taking that positioning and scaling to 20 million is a different thing in entirety. So walk me through a little bit of that journey. Like, how did you get that first million? How did you get to 20 million by, just having the insider knowledge of how Gen Y thinks? Like, what, how did you package that? How did you sell that? How did you grow that in a sense?
Right. The genius to the packaging was actually something we stumbled into. We just kept saying, one, we wanted to sell, and we can get into that later. And we wanted to sell because we saw that we could grow. And so what we did was we created something called the Grassroots Network. And it was like what I was alluding to. We had all these people in different pockets of the country that could get us access to kids anywhere, right? And so we started to brand that. And so people knew that getting access to our Grassroots Network meant that, I could take your executive team on a field trip, right? I can take you to the barbershop or wherever, depending on what pockets of youth culture you were targeting. But we really packaged that, and we weren't even thinking in the sense of this is our IP or our brand, but internally it helped us think through, who do we need to access? Where do we need to access them? And then how can we start to give back to these communities that are helping us, right? It was only later, and even looking back, that I realized how strong that IP was. At the time, it was more operational. I just needed to know, who are all the folks I need to talk to in Boston, in New York, LA, to build out this so-called grassroots network that if someone gave me a call, I could say, all right, we can have you in a city in 1 week doing qualitative research, right? Or doing ride-alongs while kids go shopping. So that was the big IP. But what was great about that was it then became packaged and allowed people to buy into research really easily. And so if somebody said, oh, we have, we're going to launch this campaign, we want to test something. There were many times where we took product out to the consumer, and it was really quick. And it was really quick, and a quick turnaround in terms of us packaging and saying, all right, that's going to cost X. And so we were able to do that a bunch of times. And so we it wasn't, in terms of scaling, it wasn't easy, so to speak, because it was still just us traveling a ton, going out to these different cities, right? There was no part of it that I could say scaled really easily. It was a lot of fun. Made a lot of mistakes, probably way too many mistakes, but it was a lot of fun doing it.
Very, very cool, very interesting. So you basically took the positioning, you took this, you turned it into kind of some IP, and then you were able to productize it to some degree in order to kind of sell into these packages at scale. Even though the scale was a lot of work and it wasn't really productized in the way that factory style, but it still kind of worked quite well for you. So walk me through then, what was the tipping point? When did you decide, okay, I'm done with this. Let me coach other agencies on positioning?
Yeah, when we realized we were done, and it wasn't even really a done, to be honest. It was, we wanted to grow the thing, and so we then went on this journey of how do we get people to buy in, because we want to grow this even bigger, right? Like, we saw youth culture taking off, and so we were saying, how can we make this global? And so we started talking to some of the holding companies about taking a position in the agency, and many of them did. Many of them did take our calls, and we had some really good conversations. We actually had two really good offers to buy, and we fumbled them. We just fumbled both offers in a way that's laughable now, but we just didn't know what we didn't know. And quite honestly, as we got those offers, we were offended by some of them, not knowing how deals were structured in the agency space. And what I mean is, at the time we saw what was happening with the .coms, right? And so we were like, oh my God, these guys are getting so much money, which, doesn't happen in our space. So
Doesn't work the same way.
Yeah. Yeah. And so there was a little bit of arrogance on our part, and we just didn't have anybody to talk to say, oh, no, this is how it works. You're going to have to still stay on for 3 years and all this, but didn't know, and really took offense. And part of it we thought had to do with, like, if I'm being completely honest, with our race. And so we were just like, oh, this is ridiculous. And and so we fumbled. I could look back now and just say we fumbled the bag. But it was a good learning opportunity for both of us.
And then you decided, now let's talk about kind of the positioning aspect of things. So now you coach agencies and you've been mentoring them on positioning. So walk me through, what is kind of your ethos? How do you think about positioning? How do you kind of go, and because let's be honest, marketing is marketing to most people, right? So most agencies, if you think about their positioning, is I do media buying on Facebook ads. I set up HubSpot for you. I do SEO. I do branding, right? Which is like, okay, so does this other guy. So how do you approach positioning? How do you think about it as a whole?
Yeah, and I think there are a handful of people that can at least get to that part where they say we do X for Y, and that's great. What I really try to get people to do is really just focus, to hone in, and it speaks to what I was saying we did with the research firm. And so, can I get people to focus in on who is it that they want to work with, right? And what is it that they do exactly, and why are they different than some of these other firms? And that's half the battle right there. Because most people will say, well, we'll take anything. Obviously, they won't say this out loud to many people, but they're going to take most business that comes their way. And so the way I want people to think about it is really, who are the people that you want to do business with? Who are the people that you can help? And why should they believe you? Right. And so really just thinking about this unique problem that you help people solve. And then once you get there, it unlocks so many other things, right? Then you start understanding, all right, now I know where to find these people. Because the thing with positioning, and especially by the time somebody gets to me, is they may have some loose positioning, but their positioning isn't tight enough for them to start building a lead gen plan, right? For them to really start focusing on business development. And when that position does get tightened, then it becomes obvious who they should be speaking to and what they should be saying to those folks. And then at that point, we're looking at, all right, there are a lot of different business development tactics, which make the most sense for your business and your personality, right? So it's really just this folk really honing your focus. I see plenty of agencies and they'll say, we do this. And it's really just an outgrowth of the people they've worked with in the past, right? Their last 2 or 3 clients, they're like, oh, that's pretty cool. I guess that's what we do. But there's no backup. They don't have the case studies to prove it. There's no one internally that's truly an expert in this space. So it's really about telling a story that's believable to the marketplace.
Yeah. So how do you get around that? Because again, like we speak to a lot of agencies, obviously, and a lot of people come to us, and every agency I speak to, you kind of get into there's phases, right? So if you're sub $1 million, usually even sub 500,000, like sub 500,000, you're just taking whoever you can. You're just closing clients. You're delivering what you can. You're just hustling. Usually when you're around the 500 to $1 million mark, you're a little bit more honed in, especially on a specific type of service, or maybe it's a specific location, or maybe it's a specific vertical. But you're a little bit more honed in, but then you kind of get still typically engulfed in that you're another SEO agency. Maybe you're an SEO agency in Arizona and you help local businesses in Arizona, but you're still ultimately another SEO agency. So how do you kind of help people think about their business or their agency as something unique when everybody else seems to be delivering the same thing?
Yeah. No, that's a good question. I think I'll point to an example recently too. I think the biggest thing you have to answer as an agency owner is, why should somebody believe me? And so here's what I mean. I was working with an agency recently, and they were doing a lot of events, a lot of experiential stuff. And so they are top notch in delivering experiences. And so the problem is, there's a lot of big agencies that do that, that can go and put on these really cool events. And so I said, what are you going to do that's going to be different? And so for them, they were really focusing on, we can do technology. We could focus on women. And as I talked to them more, they really had this focus on women. And that in itself is still too big, right? You can't just be an experiential agency for women. And so we started honing that down more and more. And so when we got to a place where they were comfortable, and they weren't really comfortable, they still wanted to be all things to all people. When we got to that place, I said, now prove it. They couldn't prove it. And so what we started doing was really building an asset. And I said, you got to build something that makes people believe you truly understand this market. And so what's been great is, seeing them build this asset. And by asset, I mean, they built this conference that really speaks to their target audience of women. And so now women come to this conference, which happens twice a year, and it's been amazing for them. And so they've kind of backdoored the clients that they want to get to. And so those same clients that they were chasing now come on as sponsors of their event, and they have a different way to speak to them. And so when someone says, well, show me proof that you're an expert in this segment of the female audience, they have tangible proof, right? And so it really is about, how do we make somebody believe you? And that's usually what I'm trying to do. Help them build an asset so that people can believe you. And I'll give you another quick example. I do consulting in the agency space. That's my vertical. You have to own a marketing agency for me to speak to you. My asset is my thought leadership. There's hundreds of articles I've written. So when somebody says, oh, you're an expert in the space, prove it. Well, most people don't allow me to humble brag. So when they find my articles, they're like, oh, that's decent. That's good. And then they'll find a couple hundred more. And it's like, oh, well, this guy is obviously in the space. So I think it's about building an asset that can prove that you are who you say you are.
Yeah, I think, one of the things that I always try to explain to agencies when it comes to positioning and when it comes to really standing out, most people, if you were to take all of your clients and you were to get a testimonial from all of your clients, every one of those testimonials would be very different. So one testimonial may be, I worked with Jeff and he was just a really great guy and he really helped us and he kept us in line and he gave us all the accountability we needed, right? Another testimonial may be, oh yeah, they built this really great Facebook campaign and that Facebook campaign started advertising and it seemed like it was getting us some really good returns on our investment, right? And all of a sudden, these are slightly different. What you want to kind of get to, and I think that's what you're alluding to here, Jeff, is can you get to a stage where every testimonial is basically the exact same thing? It's from the same person saying the exact same outcome that you were able to achieve for them, because then it becomes, that is your USP. Look at all of this proof that I have of the same person as you who wanted the same outcome, and all of them are saying the same thing, right? And that's kind of how I try to go. Like whenever people are like, I don't know how to niche. Well, how many testimonials look the same, right? How many of your case studies look the exact same? And the more you can hone in on that, the easier it becomes to scale. So
that's good. That's good.
Yeah. Quick question for you in terms of when we like to, because we're coming up on time now. So I want to always wrap up. The thing that we love as marketers is we love shiny objects. We love looking at the next new shiny tactic that can help us market. So that being said, though, there's always those kind of go-to marketing tactics, marketing strategies that we tend to go to from our own experience. So what is your best growth tactic that you would advise any marketer, any agency, like do this and it will give you an outcome?
That's good. Mine's isn't that shiny. I'm gonna go back to something I alluded to before, and that's writing. But I don't think it has to be writing. I'll make it a little bigger. I think it has to be thought leadership. I think you have to show that you are an expert in the space in a way that suits your personality. And so that could be writing for some. It could be creating videos. It could be a podcast. It could be showing up on stage at a conference. But I think you have to put yourself in a position where people see that you are truly an expert in the space. And it's not about just doing it one time. It's about being consistently putting out your thoughts and your expertise so somebody can make a decision, right? Like the beauty of thought leadership is your audience is allowed to do some due diligence and research and decide, is this somebody that can actually help me, right? And that's what I think the beauty of it is that they can do their own research and get a feel for you. And then by the time, for me, by the time people call me, it's like, oh, this is great. How can we start? Right? I don't have to do that awkward dance of tell me more about yourself or this. They've done all that work for themselves.
Totally. No, that's a very fair point. And it's funny. We've done a lot of these funnel vision episodes at this stage, and everyone has given us a different growth tactic. Every single one person so far has given us a different growth tactic, which shows you how many there are out there. Jeff, I truly appreciate your time. If you are listening to this episode and you are a marketer and you need help with positioning, contact Jeff Meade. We'll get to your contact details in just a second. If you are a performance marketing agency and you want to learn more about how you can visualize your strategies and showcase them to clients, check out funnelx.io. Jeff, where can people learn more about you?
Yeah, thanks. They can go to my website, themeadecompany.com. Really easy. The Meade, Meade, company, spell it out, themeadecompany.com.
Cool. Awesome. We'll put that in the show notes as well. Thank you for your time and thank you for your insights.
Great. Thank you so much.